The silver wolf collapsed before the second bite could land. Dr. Elin Ward caught the beast's massive head against her shoulder as his claws tore 4 grooves through the tiled floor. Behind her, 50 frightened women pressed against the walls of the royal infirmary, each wearing the same copper restraint around one wrist. In front of her stood King Cassian Rourke, bareheaded, furious, and bleeding from the mark Elin had accidentally left on his neck. "Do not touch him again," he ordered. Elin ignored him. At 53, she had spent 3 decades treating injuries other physicians blamed on weakness, disobedience, or age. She knew the difference between a dying animal and a controlled one. The king's wolf was not sick. He was being commanded from somewhere else, and the small brass river compass clenched in Elin's hand had begun pointing, not north, but directly at the scar beneath Cassian's throat. The wolf's eyes rolled toward her, not pleading, warning. Then every copper restraint in the infirmary clicked shut at once. A cry moved through the women along the wall. Elin lowered the wolf's head carefully to the floor and rose. She was not tall enough to meet Cassian's gaze without lifting her chin, but she had never confused height with authority. "Open those cuffs." Cassian looked past her at the restrained women. "They are under fever quarantine." "No, they are under scent suppression." His expression did not change. That made her trust him less, not more. The women had been brought from the mountain districts over the past 6 months. Officially, they suffered from recurring heat delirium, violent instinct, and contagious wolf fever. Elin had been summoned because she was the kingdom's chief winter rescuer and the only physician who had publicly challenged the diagnosis. She had expected resistance. She had not expected to be locked inside the infirmary with the patients, or to discover that the Alpha King himself bore the same unnatural scar pattern hidden beneath every woman's copper restraint. Cassian stepped closer. "You were instructed to examine them, not interfere with royal security. You asked me to determine why their wolves are fading. I asked for a medical assessment, and I am giving you one. Their bodies are healthy, their instincts are being throttled." His gaze moved to the compass in her hand. "What is that?" "A river compass. It is pointing at me." I noticed. The silver wolf tried to rise behind her. His front legs trembled. Cassian turned toward him with a sharp command in the old Alpha tongue. The wolf flattened his ears. Then he refused. A visible shock passed through every guard near the door. Cassian's own face stayed controlled, but Elin saw the brief stillness in his shoulders. The wolf had not merely disobeyed. He had looked at Elin before doing it. Cassian lowered his voice. "There." The wolf dragged himself forward one painful step and placed his body between Elin and the king. No one in the room seemed to breathe. Elin did. She crouched beside Vare again and touched 2 fingers to the pulse beneath his jaw. Too fast. His skin burned under the dense silver fur, but his gums were pale. Fever without infection. Exhaustion without exertion. A command injury. She had seen something similar once, years earlier, when a poacher used a whistle pitched below human hearing to drive trained wolves over a cliff. The animals had fought the signal until their hearts failed. Elin looked at the copper cuffs. Each one held a narrow groove filled with black resin. Who fitted these? The chief palace physician, Lord Harlan Say, stepped forward from the row of observers. He was a handsome man in his 60s, smooth-haired and calm in the practiced way of men who expected their credentials to end every argument. "I did," he said, "under the king's authority." Elin met Cassian's gaze. There it was. Not ignorance, not innocence. Authority. Cassian had approved this. Say continued. The restraints prevent involuntary biting during heat episodes. Several patients became dangerous. Which ones? His pause was small. Elin heard it anyway. Records are available. That was not my question. One of the restrained women spoke from the wall. None of us bit anyone. A guard moved toward her. Elin stood so quickly the compass struck the buckle of her belt. Touch her, and I leave. Cassian's attention snapped back to Elin. You are not in a position to make demands. I am the only person in this room who knows why your wolf is dying." Vere gave a rough, involuntary shudder against her leg. Cassian's control finally cracked, not loudly. His hand opened at his side, then closed again. "What do you need?" The question changed the room. Sae turned. "Your Majesty." Cassian did not look at him. "What do you need, Dr. Ward?" Every cuff opened. No guards within arm's reach of the patients. Clean water, salt, the black resin removed and sealed in glass. And no one issues your wolf another command until I say so. That last condition is impossible. Then he may be dead before sunset. Cassian looked down at Vere. The wolf had served him in war, coronation, flood, and famine. That history was visible in the king's silence. At last, Cassian raised one hand. "Open the restraints." Sae's face hardened. "The women may become unstable." Elin answered without looking at him. "Then stand close enough to prove it." The cuffs were unlocked one by one. No woman lunged, no one screamed. Most simply rubbed the bruised skin beneath the copper. The oldest patient, a broad-shouldered miller named Tamsin Hale, did not move when her restraint came free. She stared at it in her lap, as if it had taken something she could not yet name. Elin knelt beside her. "How long have you worn this?" 11 weeks. "What happened before they brought you here?" Tamsin glanced at Cassian, then away. "My wolf stopped answering me." "Before or after the cuff?" "Before, but only after the census men came." Cassian spoke from behind Elin. "What census men?" Tamsin's mouth tightened. "Royal assessors. They measured our houses, our wells, our food stores. They took scent samples from every woman over 40. "That was a winter relief survey," Cassian said. Tamsin finally looked at him. "Then why did 3 women disappear after refusing?" Sae stepped in. "Confusion is a symptom of wolf fever." Elin picked up the open cuff with her gloved hand. The black resin inside had softened from body heat. She lifted it near her nose but did not inhale deeply. Bitter pine, iron, burned poppy, and beneath those, something animal. Not wolf, human scent. She turned the cuff toward the light. A tiny pattern had been stamped into the inner copper, 3 curved lines crossing a vertical bar. The same pattern, almost healed, lay beneath Cassian's bite mark. Her accidental bite had broken the skin just enough to expose it. Elin looked at him. "Who placed the scar on your neck?" "No one." "It did not form itself." Cassian's hand rose toward the mark, then stopped. "It appeared after my binding ceremony at 21. Sae spoke too quickly. "A traditional alpha reaction." Elin watched him. There were moments in rescue work when the mountain shifted before the avalanche. A single pebble, a groan beneath the snow, a bird rising without sound. This was one of those moments. She turned the brass compass over in her palm. It had belonged to her mother, a river pilot who could find a safe channel in floodwater by watching how the needle trembled near submerged iron. Elin had carried it through 30 winters. It had never pointed at a person. Until she touched Cassian's blood. "Your Majesty," she said, "who conducted your binding ceremony?" Cassian did not answer immediately. Sae did. "My predecessor." "Name?" "Master Oren Vale." Tamsin made a broken sound behind Elin. Everyone turned toward her. She had gone pale. "Oren Vale came to our district," she whispered. "He led the census team." Cassian's expression sharpened. "Vale died 12 years ago." Tamsin shook her head. "I know the man who put that cuff on me." Sae moved toward her. All professional concern. Trauma can distort memory. Vere's head lifted. His lips pulled back from his teeth. Not at Tamsin. At Sae. The physician stopped. Cassian looked from his wolf to the man who had advised him for 16 years. "Sae," he said quietly, "step away from her." Sae obeyed. Elin placed the cuff inside a glass basin. The resin carries a command scent. The copper keeps it against the pulse. Whoever made these learned how to weaken the bond between a woman and her wolf. And Vere? Cassian asked. Elin glanced at the scar on his neck. The same system may be inside you. His face closed again. I have never worn a restraint. No, you wear authority. The words struck harder than she intended. Cassian's eyes narrowed. Explain. She rose and faced him fully. A restraint does not need to look like a prison. Sometimes it looks like a ritual, a title, a command everyone tells you is natural. Say gave a low, incredulous laugh. You are suggesting the Alpha King has been controlled for 30 years without noticing. I am suggesting men who believe control is protection are often the last to notice who taught them that belief. Cassian took one measured step toward her. Vare growled. The king stopped. Elin saw the pain in that restraint. Not wounded pride alone, the private terror of a man whose oldest companion no longer trusted his voice. She softened her tone, not her meaning. I need to examine the scar. No. Then I cannot help him. You already bit me once without permission. The memory flashed between them. It had happened less than an hour earlier when Vare collapsed during the inspection. Cassian had caught Elin from behind as the wolf struck the medicine table. The black resin spilled. A wave of heat and cedar scent hit her with enough force to blur her sight. Her rescue instincts, trained to break a predator's hold, had taken over. She had turned and bitten the side of his neck. Not seductively, not gently. Hard enough to make him release her. Hard enough to expose the hidden mark. Elin's voice went flat. You grabbed me after I told you not to. I was pulling you away from a collapsing wolf. You could have warned me. There was no time. There was no time. There was enough time to decide my body was yours to move. A few guards studied the floor. Cassian did not defend himself. That surprised her. After a moment, he said, You are right. Say looked appalled. Elin was more cautious than impressed. Powerful men often apologized beautifully when nothing depended on it. Cassian continued, You set a boundary. I ignored it. My reason does not erase the act. The words were clean. No demand for forgiveness. He unfastened the high collar of his black uniform and folded it down, exposing the side of his neck. But if you examine me, he said, you tell me before you touch me. Elin held his gaze. And you may stop me at any point. Yes. She washed her hands, changed gloves, and approached. Up close, Cassian looked older than his portraits. 48 perhaps, with silver beginning at his temples and exhaustion carved beside his mouth. The scar beneath the bite was nearly colorless. 3 curved lines. 1 vertical bar. Elin lifted the compass. The needle swung toward the mark so violently it struck the glass. Vare whined. Cassian's breath changed, but he did not move. I am going to press beside the scar, Elin said. He nodded. Her gloved fingers touched the skin below his ear. The reaction was immediate. Vare convulsed. Every freed patient along the wall cried out, as if one nerve connected them all. The infirmary lamps dimmed. Somewhere inside the palace, a deep bell began ringing without anyone pulling the rope. Cassian caught the edge of the table, but did not touch Elin. Under her fingers, something shifted beneath his skin. Not flesh. Metal. Elin withdrew her hand. There is an implant. Saye turned toward the door. Vare moved faster. Weak as he was, the wolf lunged across the tiles and blocked the physician's path. Cassian's voice became deadly calm. Where are you going? To summon surgical assistance. No, Elin said. He is going to destroy the records. Saye faced them. This is absurd. Tamsin rose from the wall. The census men carried black cases marked with that symbol. Another woman spoke. They said the king ordered it. Cassian went still. One by one, the patients looked at him. Not with reverence, with the exhausted hatred of people harmed by a system bearing his name. Elin watched him understand the scale of his mistake. He had not created the cuffs. He had not taken the women. But he had approved the emergency health decree that allowed royal physicians to confine anyone labeled unstable. He had trusted reports because he believed centralized control prevented chaos. His fatal certainty had made the machinery possible. Cassian looked at Say. "Seal the infirmary." The guards moved. Elin stepped between them and the door. "No." His gaze cut to her. "He cannot be allowed to leave. Neither can the truth. I am containing a threat. You are repeating the same decision that put these women in cuffs." The accusation landed in front of everyone. Cassian's face hardened. "What do you propose?" "Open the doors." A murmur swept the room. Say smiled faintly, sensing advantage. "You would release potentially unstable patients into the palace? I would let witnesses choose whether they remain." Cassian looked at the women. "And if someone is harmed?" "Then we manage the harm. We do not erase people to prevent the possibility of disorder." His eyes held hers for a long moment. This was not only a medical decision. It was the first test of whether he could loosen his grip when control felt most justified. At last, Cassian turned to the guards. "Open the doors. No one leaves the palace grounds until statements are taken, but no patient is confined without consent." Say's smile vanished. Tamsin walked out first. Not running, not trembling. She paused beside Cassian and placed the copper cuff in his hand. "My daughter wore one too," she said. "She died before they brought me here." Cassian closed his fingers around the metal. "I did not know." Tamsin's expression did not soften. "You signed the decree." Then she passed him. The other women followed. Cassian stood with the cuff in his palm and Vare at his feet, the cost of his authority moving past him one witness at a time. Elin returned to the basin and examined the softened resin. A thin strip of red glass had emerged from its center. Her river compass began to hum. She held the fragment beside it. The two pieces answered each other with a faint vibration. The compass was not merely detecting the command system. It had once been part of it. A memory rose from Elin's childhood, her mother locking the compass inside a drawer whenever royal riders came through their village. Her warning, spoken only once. "Never let a king see what this needle can find." Elin looked at Cassian. He was watching her now, not as a physician, not as a subject, but as the one person in the room who could lead him toward a truth he had helped bury. Say made a sudden move. He struck the glass basin from the table. It shattered against the floor. Black resin sprayed across the tiles. Vare roared. The freed women in the corridor dropped to their knees as pain tore through them. Cassian staggered, one hand clamping over the scar beneath Elin's bite. The command scent filled the infirmary, and this time, the silver wolf did not resist the hidden signal. He turned toward Elin with murder in his eyes. Elin did not run. The moment Vare lowered his head, she saw what the command had stolen from him. His body prepared to attack, but his front paws fought for purchase against the tile. One dragged backward, his ears flattened, as if he were trying to make himself smaller inside his own skin. "Cassian," she said, keeping her voice level. "Do not command him." The king's hand was still pressed to his neck. Pain had stripped the color from his face, but his voice remained controlled. "He is about to kill you." "He is trying not to." Vare lunged. Elin moved sideways, not away. The wolf's teeth closed on the sleeve of her forest green coat instead of her arm. His weight drove her against the medicine table. Bottles crashed around them. She twisted her gloved hand into the thick fur beneath his jaw and held on as his body shook with violent, competing impulses. "Vare," Cassian said. The wolf convulsed harder. "I told you not to command him. I said his name. To him, there may be no difference." Black resin smoked between the broken shards on the floor. The bitter scent crawled into Elin's throat. Around them, women cried out from the corridor, some clutching their wrists, others pressing palms to their chests where their wolves had once answered. Saye backed toward the side door. Cassian saw him. "Stop." Saye froze. The single word hit Vare like a blade. His jaws tightened on Elin's sleeve, tearing wool and grazing the leather beneath. Cassian heard the fabric rip and went rigid. Elin looked directly at him. Every order strengthens it. The king's face changed. For a man who had ruled through command since youth, silence was not absence. It was surrender. He lowered his hand from his neck. Saye took another step. Cassian did not stop him. Elin understood the cost of that restraint. Letting Saye move meant risking evidence, escape, perhaps more victims. But another command might force Vare to finish the attack. Door, Elin told Cassian. His gaze shifted to the brass lever beside the wall. She did not need to explain. He crossed the room without speaking and pulled it down. The side door sealed with an iron bar. Side struck it with both hands. You cannot imprison a royal physician on the word of an outsider. Cassian said nothing. The silence frightened Saye more than anger would have. Elin loosened her grip on Vare's fur by one careful inch. Good. Fight the scent, not me. The wolf's breath burned through the torn fabric at her wrist. His eyes were nearly black, but a narrow ring of silver remained around each pupil. She shifted her free hand toward the brass compass lying beneath the table. Vare growled. I am reaching for the compass, she said, though she did not know whether he could understand tone through the command. Her fingers closed around it. The needle spun wildly until she pressed the red glass against the torn place in her coat where Vare's teeth had touched. The humming deepened. Vare jerked his head away from her. The command scent did not disappear, but its hold faltered. Elin brought the compass near the wolf's nose. He recoiled, then leaned toward it again, drawing one cautious breath. The red glass warmed in her palm. A thin line of light traveled beneath the metal casing, revealing markings she had never seen before. Not directions, frequencies. Her mother's compass had been built to find more than submerged iron. It could interrupt whatever signal lived inside the resin. Salt water, Elin said. Cassian reached for a pitcher. Ask me where. He stopped. For half a second, confusion crossed his face. Then he understood that she was not correcting his medical knowledge. She was forcing him to practice what power had never required of him. Where do you want it? Across the resin. Slowly. He obeyed. The water struck the floor in a clear sheet. Salt hissed against the black substance. The resin hardened at once, trapping the smoke inside a gray crust. Vare released Elin's sleeve. He staggered back, coughing, then collapsed with his head against her boot. Elin crouched beside him. May I touch him? Cassian asked. The question was quiet enough that only she heard it. She checked the wolf's pupils and breathing. His shoulder, not his head. Cassian knelt and placed one hand where she indicated. Vare flinched but did not pull away. The king closed his eyes for a moment. Saye watched them from the barred door. You think this proves control? It proves contamination. The woman brought that device into the palace. Her family built river instruments for smugglers and rebels. Elin looked up. Cassian did not. How do you know what her family built? He asked. Saye's mouth closed. The question settled over the shattered infirmary. Elin rose slowly, still holding the compass. You recognized it. I recognized the design. You called it a river instrument before I explained what it was. Saye straightened. Royal archives contain thousands of confiscated devices. Cassian looked at Elin. Did you tell anyone you were bringing it? No. Did the summons request it? No. Saye's composure remained, but sweat had appeared at his temples. Elin stepped toward him. Who was Oren Vale? The physician gave a tired sigh, as though forced to educate inferior minds. A pioneer. He believed unstable instincts could be corrected before they became violence. By severing women from their wolves? By protecting communities from biological disorder. Tamsin stood in the corridor, one hand braced against the frame. My daughter was not disordered. Saye looked at her without recognition. Many families refuse difficult truths. She was 46. She organized our winter grain routes. She argued with the census men because they marked widows as dependent households. That caught Elin's attention. Dependent for what? Tamsin swallowed. Relocation. Cassian turned toward her. No relocation orders were issued. Not publicly. One of the other women spoke. They offered protected housing near the eastern mines. Another added, only to women whose wolves had weakened. Elin saw the shape of the system before all the pieces arrived. Older women, landowners, skilled workers, widows without sons, women who could resist transfer of property because their wolves strengthened their legal standing under mountain custom. Remove the wolf, and the woman became easier to classify as vulnerable. Easier to relocate, easier to dispossess. Cassian reached the same conclusion a breath later. His face did not show rage. It showed shame. "Sae," he said, "how many districts use the Winter Relief Survey?" The physician glanced at Vare. Cassian remained silent. The absence of command forced the question to stand on its own. "At least 9, Sae answered. "Under whose authority?" "Yours." The truth was not a defense, but he used it like one. Cassian rose from beside the wolf. "I authorized food counts and medical screening. You authorized intervention when local leaders failed to control dangerous behavior. I did not authorize restraints. You authorized discretion." Elin watched Cassian absorb the difference. Discretion had been the word men used whenever they wanted cruelty without fingerprints. Tamsin entered the infirmary and lifted the copper cuff from where Cassian had dropped it. "My daughter refused relocation," she said. 3 days later, her wolf attacked her in her sleep. Elin turned sharply. "Her own wolf?" Tamsin nodded. "They said it proved the fever had reached her mind." Vare gave a weak, pained sound. The command system had not merely silenced wolves. It could turn them against the people they had protected all their lives. Cassian looked down at the scar beneath Elin's bite. "And this was placed in me so my commands could activate it." Sae smiled then. Not broadly, not like a villain pleased with discovery, like a physician relieved that a slow student had finally understood the lesson. "Your commands did not activate it," he said. "They powered it." Yulin felt cold move through her chest. Sae continued. "The alpha line carries a resonance stronger than any mechanical source. Orin spent decades trying to reproduce it. Then your father allowed him to bind the prototype into your body." Cassian's voice was nearly expressionless. "My father knew. He believed a united kingdom required a united instinct. And you continued after his death. I improved it." Vare's silver eyes opened. Sae looked toward the wolf. "Every public order, every emergency decree, every command delivered through the royal network strengthened the signal. You wanted obedience without delay. We gave it to you." Cassian's hands closed at his sides. Elin saw the urge to command, condemn, destroy. He looked at her instead. "What happens if the implant is removed?" "I do not know yet." Sae laughed once. "He dies." Tamsin flinched. Cassian did not. Elin studied the compass. "You said Orin built a prototype. My mother hid this from royal riders. Was she part of it?" Sae's expression shifted with real interest. "Elin Ward was the finest signal cartographer Orin ever trained." The name struck Elin harder than the wolf had. Her mother had never spoken of royal service. She had described herself only as a river pilot. "She left," Elin said. "She stole the calibration core and disappeared." The compass grew heavy in Elin's hand. Its red glass was not a detector. It was the missing part of the machine. Sae nodded toward it. "Without that core, we could weaken instinct, redirect it, even suppress it. But we could not stabilize the king's wolf. That is why Vare has been deteriorating." Cassian looked at Elin. "Your mother took the one thing that could save him." "No," Sae said. "She took the one thing that could make the system permanent." The meaning changed again. The key object Elin had trusted all her life could cure the victims, or complete the weapon. She closed her fingers around it. "What did my mother intend?" she asked. Sae's gaze settled on her with almost tender cruelty. She intended to destroy the network. Then she learned what would happen to every wolf already connected to it. The women in the corridor listened. Cassian's voice came low. What would happen? They would die with the signal. No one spoke. Elin looked at Vare, then at the bruised wrists of the women, then at the compass her mother had carried away rather than use. Her mother had not abandoned the victims. She had faced an impossible choice and hidden the only tool that could either free them or kill them. Cassian stepped closer, stopping well outside Elin's reach. Can you use it safely? Not without understanding the network. Then we find the records. Say leaned against the barred door. There are no records here. Vare lifted his head and fixed his gaze on the physician's left hand. Say's smallest finger wore a black iron ring. The wolf dragged himself upright and crossed the tiles toward him. Cassian did not command him. Vare sniffed the ring once, then struck Say's hand with his paw. The ring fell. It did not land like solid metal. It opened on impact. Inside was a coil of red glass no larger than a fingernail. Elin picked it up with forceps. The compass needle locked onto it. A relay, she said. You carry the signal with you. Say's calm finally broke. Do not connect those. Why? Because the network will recognize the core. Cassian looked toward the palace windows. Beyond them, bells began sounding from tower to tower. Not alarm bells. Response bells. Across the city, wolves started howling. One call became 10, 10 became hundreds. The women in the corridor bent under a shared pressure. Elin's compass pulsed in her hand like a second heart. Say's face went gray. It knows she is here, he whispered. Cassian turned to Elin. What knows? The crown sluice, Say said. The chamber beneath the palace where every command is collected and redistributed. Elin stared at Cassian. He knew the name. She saw it before he spoke. What is the crown sluice? His silence lasted too long. Elin, he said, there is something I did not tell you. The use of her first name felt wrong in front of the pain around them. What? 3 years ago, after border wolves began refusing military orders, I authorized the sluice to be reactivated. Tamsin's face hardened. Elin's grip tightened around the compass. You knew there was a command network. I was told it carried emergency messages through bonded packs. You did not ask how. I asked whether it would prevent another massacre. And when they said yes, you stopped asking. Cassian did not deny it. Every moment of respect he had earned since opening the cuffs remained real. So did this. His wrong was not a secret act committed by someone else under his name. He had chosen the machinery because it promised control. How many times did you use it? Elin asked. 7. Say laughed softly. Hundreds of thousands of wolves heard him. Cassian looked at Elin as if he wanted to step closer and knew he had lost the right. The sluice records may still show who was targeted. Then we go there, she said. I will take you. No. Elin, you will open the route. You will provide guards chosen by the women, not by your physician. And you will not enter the control chamber unless I ask. His face went still. It is beneath my palace. That is exactly why you do not get to lead the investigation. The boundary stood between them, harder than the iron door. Cassian glanced at Tamsin, then at Vare. Finally, he inclined his head. Agreed. Say moved without warning. He kicked the relay from Elin's forceps and crushed it beneath his heel. The compass screamed. A sharp metallic note tore through the infirmary. Vare collapsed again. The women cried out as their wolves surged awake inside them, not free, but terrified. Cassian caught Elin's arm. She tore herself from his grip before he could steady her. I said no. I know. But he did not release immediately. That hesitation was enough. Guards flooded through the main doors, summoned by the bells. Their captain saw Cassian holding Elin, the broken relay beneath Say's boot, and the freed patients crowding the corridor. Say pointed at the compass. She activated an attack on the royal bond. The captain drew his sword. Cassian released Elin at last. "Stand down," he ordered. The command rolled through the room. Vare's body arched. Every woman screamed. Cassian's face broke with horror, but the order had already entered the network. The guards seized Elin. Her compass was torn from her hand. Say caught it before it struck the floor. Cassian stepped forward. "Give that to her." The physician looked at the convulsing wolf. "Another command, Your Majesty?" Cassian stopped. Say turned to the captain. "Under the emergency health decree, Dr. Ward is to be isolated until the source of the attack is contained." Elin looked at Cassian. He could stop this only by using the power that was killing them. Or he could let the system he had built take her. "Do not command them," she said. The guards pulled her toward the door. Cassian's face held a kind of pain she might once have mistaken for devotion. Now she saw the harder truth. He had created a kingdom where doing the right thing still depended on his order. And because she would not let him give it, she was dragged away while Saye closed his hand around the one object that could free every wolf in the realm. The cell door closed without a royal command. That mattered. Elin stood in the narrow stone room beneath the Eastern Infirmary and listened to the bolt slide into place. The guards had taken her coat, gloves, and tool belt. They had left the torn leather sleeve beneath, perhaps because Saye considered it harmless. He had also left her alone. That was his mistake. Elin pressed 2 fingers to the bite-shaped bruise forming along her wrist where Vare's teeth had caught the leather. The wolf had fought the command hard enough to redirect his jaws. The pattern was uneven, but one edge of the mark had begun to warm. Not like infection, like the compass. A faint vibration traveled through the floor. The crown sluice was below her. Say had not imprisoned her at random. He had placed her close to the network because he intended to use her. Footsteps approached. Elin moved away from the wall as Tamsin appeared beyond the bars, escorted by a young female guard with a scar across her chin. The guard unlocked the door. "Tamsin?" "The king asked the patients to choose 6 people they trusted," she said. "I chose Captain Nera." The guard inclined her head. His Majesty gave no order. He made a public request and surrendered the keys. Elin stepped into the corridor. "Where is he?" "Outside the sluice." That answer carried weight. "He kept my boundary." "So far," Tamsin said. But Saye took the compass below. The bells have not stopped. They descended through service tunnels built from black river stone. The vibration intensified with each turn. Behind sealed doors, mechanisms groaned under the palace like an animal trapped beneath ice. At the final stair, Cassian waited beside an iron barrier. He had removed his royal coat and weapons. Blood stained the collar of his shirt, where the implant pressed against the bite wound. Vare lay several feet behind him, guarded by 2 of the freed women rather than soldiers. Cassian did not move toward Elin. "Say entered 12 minutes ago," he said. The barrier dropped after him. "Why are you still here?" "You told me not to enter unless asked." The answer did not repair what he had done. It proved he had heard her. Beyond it approached the barrier. Beyond it stretched a vaulted chamber, filled with bronze channels and red glass tubes. At its center stood a circular platform built around a vertical column of black metal. The compass rested inside a slot near the top. Saye stood beneath it, fastening copper leads around his wrists. "You are late," he called. Elin gripped the bars. "Remove the compass." "I cannot. It has already recognized the king's line." Red light moved through the channels. Across the chamber, dozens of carved markers began to glow. Each bore the symbol from the cuffs. Cassian stared at them. "District relays." "Not districts," Elin said. She read the labels. "Mills, clinics, widow houses, recovery wards, military pensions." Locations where older women held land, skills, testimony, or influence. The Winter Relief Program had not drifted into abuse. It had been designed to convert independent women into dependents. Say raised his hands as the copper leads tightened. "You think this was theft," he said. "It was stabilization. The kingdom cannot survive every private instinct resisting public order. Tamsin stepped beside Elin. My daughter died because she resisted you. Your daughter died because the king lacked the courage to complete the system. Cassian's voice remained low. Do not place your work inside my failure. Say looked almost pleased. Your failure was hesitation. You wanted the benefits of obedience while pretending choice still mattered. That defense landed because part of it was true. Cassian had approved the sluice. He had accepted results without demanding methods. He had believed control was proof of safety. Sae had exploited that belief, but he had not invented it. Elin examined the barrier. No lock, no visible hinge. The iron bars had dropped into channels cut deep into the floor. Captain Nera, where does the runoff go? The guard pointed toward a narrow trench along the wall. To the old flood tunnels. Elin crouched. The brass channels carried more than sound. Condensation dripped from them into the trench, tinged faintly red by glass dust. Her mother had been a signal cartographer and a river pilot, not two professions. One. She had learned to route command resonance the same way she routed floodwater. Elin looked at the bite mark on her wrist. Vare's contact had left a small piece of the network's resonance inside her, enough to feel its pulse. Her mother had not hidden the compass, because destroying the system would kill connected wolves. She had hidden it until someone could redirect the signal safely. Cassian, Elin said, how many floodgates feed this chamber? 3. Can they be opened manually? Yes, but the release wheels are inside. She looked at Vare. The wolf had lifted his head. His eyes were silver again. Not clear, not free, waiting. Elin turned to Cassian. I need you to enter. He did not ask why she had changed the boundary. What do you need me to do? Nothing until I say it. Not one command. I understand. Captain Nera produced the keys to a side access gate. Cassian unlocked it himself, but did not step through. Elin moved first. The moment she crossed into the chamber, the compass flared. Sae smiled. There you are. A force struck Elin's chest and drove her to one knee. Every connected wolf entered her awareness at once. Not voices, not words. Pressure, fear in hundreds of bodies. Rage turned inward. Instincts forced to obey commands they did not understand. She braced one hand on the wet stone. Cassian entered behind her, but did not touch her. Can you stand? Yes. It was not entirely true. It was enough. They moved toward the first flood wheel. Sae pulled one copper lead tight. The scar beneath Cassian's neck burned black. Vare roared outside the barrier. Cassian staggered. Sae's voice filled the chamber through the bronze channels. Kneel. The command was not directed at Cassian. It used him. Across the palace, wolves cried out. Cassian's knees bent. Elin caught his forearm, then immediately released it. May I steady you? Yes. She locked her hand around his sleeve. Do not fight the command, she said. Let it pass through without becoming yours. That is not how alpha power works. It is now. He looked at her. Then he stopped resisting. His knee touched the floor, not in submission to Sae, but by choice. The distinction broke the signal's rhythm. Several red tubes flickered. Elin reached the first wheel and turned it. Nothing happened. It requires royal force, Cassian said. Then use force, not authority. He rose, gripped the iron wheel, and pulled. The gate opened. Water thundered into the lower channels. Sae shouted and activated the second lead. Tamsin collapsed beyond the barrier. Vare leaped to her side, placing his body over hers instead of answering the signal. His choice changed the chamber. The compass needle swung away from Cassian and toward the flood channel. Elin understood. The network expected commands to move outward from the king. The compass could make the flow move back. Second wheel, she said. Cassian followed her. Sae stepped off the platform and drew a surgical blade. You release that water, and the relays fail. That is the point, Elin said. Thousands of wolves may never reconnect. Then they will recover by choice, not by force. You do not know that. No. But neither did you when you experimented on them. He lunged. Cassian moved between them. The blade entered beneath his ribs. Sae tore it free. Cassian struck him once with the heel of his hand, sending him against the black column. He could have killed him. He did not. Captain Nera, he called, then stopped before the words became a command. The captain understood anyway. She entered with 2 guards and restrained Sae. Cassian pressed one hand to his side. Elin reached him. May I examine the wound? Yes. It missed the artery. Hold pressure. He obeyed. Together they opened the second wheel. Water surged higher, filling the carved markers until names and symbols vanished beneath the flow. The final wheel stood beside the central platform. Sae laughed from the floor. Open that, and the implant in his neck will overload. Cassian looked at Elin. She saw no plea in his face. Only readiness. What happens? He asked. The network loses its source, she said. Your command resonance may go with it. His authority was not only political. Alpha power allowed him to compel wolves in battle, calm riots, and carry orders through bonded packs. Opening the last gate could end that permanently. Cassian looked through the barrier at the women who had suffered beneath his decrees, then at Vare. Will it free them? It should. Should. That is the truth. He placed both hands on the final wheel. Sae twisted against the guards. Without command power, the throne will collapse. Cassian did not look at him. Then it was never a throne worth keeping. He turned the wheel. The implant beneath his scar flashed white. Cassian screamed, but did not release his grip. Water struck the central platform. The compass shattered. Red glass scattered through the flood like sparks. Every tube in the crown sluice went dark. Vare's howl rose above the water. Then silence came. Not imposed silence. The silence after chains break. Cassian collapsed. Elin caught him with Captain Nera's help and guided him to the floor. The metal implant had pushed halfway through the old scar. She removed it with forceps while he remained conscious, his face gray with pain. When it came free, it was no larger than a seed, small enough to hide beneath skin, large enough to shape a kingdom. 3 days later, the Winter Relief Assembly met not in a royal court, but in the old grain exchange where the affected districts had once negotiated their own protections. No throne stood at the front. Cassian sat at the same level as everyone else, his side bandaged, the scar on his neck uncovered. Tamsin presented the copper cuff. Captain Nera presented Sae's relay ring. Elin presented the implant and the remains of the compass. Sae's defense was simple. He had acted under lawful authority to prevent instability. Cassian answered before anyone else could. The authority was mine. The harm was his design, but my belief made room for it. He did not resign in a dramatic gesture. He accepted permanent limits. The emergency health decree was repealed. Royal medical confinement was transferred to locally elected boards with patient advocates. Every property seized through wolf loss classification was restored. Families of the dead received reparations funded by the private estates of those who administered the program, including the king's own holdings. Cassian surrendered the Alpha Command network and agreed that no future ruler could rebuild it without approval from every district assembly. His wolves would never again be compelled through his voice. Vare stayed with him anyway. That choice mattered more than obedience ever had. Elin did not return to the palace. She became director of the Riverhouse Recovery Network, a mobile service run by healers, pilots, and former patients who traveled the affected districts, helping women rebuild their bonds with their wolves. It was not an office granted by the crown. The communities created it themselves. Cassian visited only after asking. The first time, Elin met him beside a repaired water wheel, where red glass fragments from the crown sluice had been melted into the paddles. Each turn caught the light and sent it across the river in brief crimson flashes. He stood at a respectful distance. "I cannot undo what I authorized," he said. "No, I will continue paying for it. Yes." He looked toward the women working along the bank. "May I keep coming back?" Elin studied him. Trust had not returned because he suffered. It had begun to return because he accepted limits when no one praised him for it. "You may ask each time," she said. A small smile touched his face. "Then I will." Months later, Vare walked beside them along the river without chain, command, or royal signal. When Cassian paused, the wolf continued toward Elin, nudged her gloved hand once, then chose a place between them. Not bowing, not obeying, choosing. Behind them, the water wheel turned through the current, carrying broken red glass into the light and sending the river forward without asking any king's permission. Do you believe accountability can earn a second chance, even when it cannot erase the harm? Share where you think Elin's boundary should remain, and subscribe for more stories of mature love, wolves, and justice.